Hi everyone, my name is Ben and welcome to the Bar Now Creative, where we talk about everything 5th edition. Today we're going to be talking about some different tips for each level of experience of Dungeon Master. So let's jump right in. Tip number 1 for beginners is to start with something pre-written. It's not to say you can't write something yourself, you totally could, but just often enough you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be preparing, so you end up preparing not enough or too much or in the wrong area. It's just easier to go with something that has already been written and prepared for you. The Lost Mines of Phandelver is super popular because of how well written and simple it is. It provides new DMs plenty of space to breathe while giving them enough structure to work out of. And it's super short, so if you run it, you pretty soon can get the hang of everything and move on to bigger and better things. Now if you are absolutely determined to run a full campaign from the get-go, that's fine. Just do some research into which modules take less initial prep work from the DM. Curse of Strahd, super popular, but in my experience takes a lot more prep work than something like Tomb of Annihilation. Number 2, do not try to be Matt or Brennan or any other famous DM. Yes, it is absolutely fine to draw inspiration from them. They're very good at what they do. They're a celebrity DM for a reason. But more often than not, they come from a place where they have a ton of experience behind the screen, on stage, on camera, or some combination of all three of those. I'm not saying you can't achieve that same level of accomplishment. Often enough, the person that becomes the forever DM at their table ends up being the absolute best person to run for that group of people. But what I'm saying is if you want to sit down and expect to channel the immortal energies of Gary Gygax and Chris Perkins, it's going to be kind of like stepping off the t-ball field and expecting to be Babe Ruth. It's possible, it's just really not likely going to happen for you. There's a whole further video in here somewhere about session 0 and setting expectations, but we're not going to get into that right now. And my third tip for beginner DMs, don't worry about making mistakes. I know, telling somebody not to worry just makes them worry more, but really, it's totally fine. Everybody makes mistakes. It's not going to be that big of a deal. Just when it happens, be super honest with your table about it. Say, guys, I made this mistake, I'm going to fix it in the future, and then move on. Often enough, if you're a beginning DM, you're playing with friends or people you're super comfortable with, so they should understand. Make note of it, fix it for next time. It'll be okay. Alright, my first tip for intermediate level Dungeon Masters is to define your style of DMing. At this point, I'm assuming you've run a decent number of games, and you've developed sort of a system, and you should figure out exactly what it is that makes up your style. Defining your style of DMing means that you're going to take a look at how you prep for and run the game and just really sort of own it. Unconsciously or not at this point, you've probably been stealing different things from different people on how they run the game to create sort of your own hodgepodge amalgamation. Defining your style means that you're going to take a look at what you like about that and really deepen it to create your own definitive style. Number 2 for intermediate Dungeon Masters is to collaborate with your players. At this point, you should have built up enough experience to be able to figure out and tell a more engaging story by interweaving their characters more closely with the plot that you're trying to push forward. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to make them the core pillar of the story. It can still be way bigger than they are, and it definitely doesn't mean that you should be telling them about everything that's coming with absolutely no veil of secrecy. It just means that you should be able to pick and choose the ideas that they give you, find the ones that you really like, and then expand on those to help deepen the plot of the story. You can still run the story arc that you want to run, for sure, but who's to say that the BBEG hasn't noticed this group of effective superheroes walking through their world and doesn't want to pick up some kind of insurance against them? This can take the form of influencing people from their past or their present, kidnapping their families, or even somehow infiltrating the group. Anything that you can add with a more personal touch will draw the players in more and make them more connected than if they were just some merry band of mercenaries raiding a wizard's tower for gold. Not that there's anything wrong with that either. And my third tip for intermediate DMs is to run some one-shots in a different setting than the campaign that you're playing. At this point, you've probably established a campaign and are running your way through it. However, it's good to take a break every once in a while to explore a different setting. You're running a dungeon crawl heavy campaign? Take a week to plan a heist in a city. A lighthearted jaunt through the forest? A week for a gritty crime drama. Trudging through the Arctic? Take a week to go exploring a temple in the desert. These alternative settings for a week at a time can really help you develop your improv skills and your ability to pivot on your toes. You know, 2 of the more paramount DM skills. Plus, it'll give your players a chance to experiment with different character options and give you a chance to figure out how to plan against those different character options. Plus, Playing for no stakes is fun sometimes. My first tip for all of you expert level DMs out there is to play whenever possible. As we know, most consistent groups see the rise of one person who becomes the forever DM, and that's not a bad thing at all. It's super important to develop a healthy and consistent table dynamic. But don't go building a house behind the DM screen. Handing off the reins to someone else is a great exercise in not only trust, but also in reminding yourself what the viewpoint from the other side of the table is like. Being a player and being a DM are very different things. And if you sit behind the screen for too long, you might forget where they're coming from. So it's good to help yourself refocus and make sure you're still heading in the right direction as a DM. Number 2, teach new players and dungeon masters. Even the most experienced and well-entrenched DMs in the world have been thrown by newbies every once in a while. They come in with this sense of total bewilderment or skepticism with no point of reference and ask questions that people who have been playing for a while either don't think to ask or wouldn't ever want to ask. Also, one of the best ways to cement your knowledge is to try and guide someone through the steps of learning the new game, because you have to be absolutely confident in what you're telling them. And if you're not an absolutely confident teacher and not confident in what you know, you're going to struggle with teaching. And to top that one off, it's just a nice thing to do. The game is growing every single day, and if somebody is coming to you to ask you for help in learning how to play it, they not only trust you, but believe in your knowledge enough to ask you to be the one to guide them into this fantastic game. And finally, number 3 for the expert DMs. It applies to everybody, but I think it's most important for the experts to hear this. Never stop learning. As soon as you sit back on your heels and decide that you know everything there is to know about D&D and there's nothing more you can learn, you're going to plateau. Your games are going to plateau, and they might start to deteriorate. Even if you were in Gygax's first group and you've read every piece of official and unofficial D&D media ever published with your eidetic memory, so you've got it memorized word for word, you can still fall into this trap. The world is producing new content for every edition of the game every single day. Find it, read it, learn it. If you're at this level, you should be able to separate the good from the bad anyway. Go ahead and implement it in whatever way you can. But also, if you're watching a tips video on YouTube and you're at this level, kind of probably preaching to the choir here. Let me know what some of your favorite tips for different levels of experience in the DM chair are. Do you agree with what I said here? Did I miss something big? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't yet, please subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. I try and push videos out every Friday. But until next time, keep on rolling.